He reached for my hand just as I was about to walk away. And in that frozen second, everything I thought I knew about survival, about shame, about myself, shattered. I never imagined I could say yes to something so wrong, so raw, and yet feel more alive than I had in years. This wasn't about pleasure. It wasn't even about money. It was about reclaiming something I didn't know I'd lost. Stay with me until the end to find out what really happened after that night. Welcome to Vows and Betrayals, where every story cuts deeper than the last. If you've ever stood at a crossroads with no one to call, drop a comment below. Someone here will understand. Thank you for being here. Your time matters. Let's dive into the story. Hey, I'm Clara. I'm 58, and I've lived alone since the winter of 1990. That was the year Robert died. My husband, my quiet protector. He was fixing a faulty power line in a snowstorm and never made it home. I've never quite left that winter. It's clung to me like damp wool. Every year since has felt colder. It's Newark, New Jersey, December 1998. The kind of winter that seeps into your bones and stays there. My apartment is small. The radiator clanks, but doesn't warm much. The walls are thin, and so is my resolve. The fridge hums like it's mocking me. There's a single can of beans on the shelf. I open it with a rusted key, dump it into a pot, and set it on the old stove. The pilot flame flickers low. As I stir, I glance down. My wedding ring is still there. I touch it sometimes without thinking, like a habit carved into muscle. I used to believe it meant I was loved. Now, it just reminds me what I've survived. Rent's 3 months overdue. I've pawned my last pair of good shoes and skipped more dinners than I'd admit. The phone hasn't rung in weeks. I don't expect it to. At 58, invisible is something you learn to wear. And then there it was, the knock. 3 slow, deliberate thuds. Not the kind of knock that says neighbor. No. This knock had weight. I didn't need to look. I already knew. Mr. Granger, the landlord. I tightened my robe, crossed the cold linoleum floor, and opened the door. He was exactly as I remembered. Tall, wiry, always in that long camel coat. His eyes scanned me the way a butcher looks at a cut of meat he's already priced. And then he smiled just enough to show it wasn't kindness. "Evening, Clara," he said. "Mind if I come in?" He didn't wait for the answer. He stepped inside like he owned the place, his boots thudding softly against the cracked linoleum. The smell of cold air and something bitter followed him. I closed the door behind him, slowly, more from habit than consent. He took a long look around the room. The threadbare couch, the peeling paint near the window. His gaze landed on the pot simmering weakly on the stove. "Dinner?" he asked, not with curiosity, more like mockery. I didn't answer. He turned toward me, his eyes sharper now. "You know why I'm here." I nodded. 3 months, Clara. That's not just late. That's neglect. His tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed, like a teacher scolding a failing student, or a wolf feigning concern for the sheep. I opened my mouth, but the words came out dry. "I just need more time." He raised an eyebrow, stepped closer. "You've said that before." "I'm trying. I've applied to a dozen part-time jobs. I even called the church pantry." But I shrugged helplessly. No one's hiring, and no one's giving. Mr. Granger folded his arms. "So what do you expect me to do? Just let you stay here for free?" I looked down at my feet. My toes were numb. There was silence for a beat too long. Then he spoke again. Softer this time, almost gentle. "There are other ways to settle things, Clara." The room shrank around us. I met his gaze, slowly, afraid to speak the question already forming in my mind. He didn't flinch. "I'm offering a kindness. one that no one else would. I almost laughed, but I didn't. My chest felt like it was folding in on itself. And then twist of fate or test of memory. I looked down and saw my wedding ring catching the dim light of the stove. My hand moved slightly as if to cover it. Robert's voice, faint as wind in the walls, echoed in my head. Don't ever let the world buy your soul. Clara, not even once. But when you've sold everything else, what do you have left? I looked back up at Mr. Granger. His expression hadn't changed. Patient. Calculating. He stepped closer, his breath visible in the chill air between us. No one has to know. Just you and me. He extended his hand palm up as if inviting a dance or sealing a pact. My fingers twitched, but I didn't take it. Not yet. The silence between us stretched thick like honey left too long in the jar. I could feel the weight of that outstretched hand, what it meant, what it cost. I didn't speak. My hand didn't move, but I didn't turn away either. And that was answer enough. Mr. Granger let his hand fall, then nodded once, as if we'd signed something invisible. He walked past me through the narrow hallway into my bedroom, without asking. As if he'd always known the route. I followed, legs unsteady, lungs tight. The room felt smaller than it had this morning and colder. The curtains barely shifted. The bedspread, thin floral frayed at the corners, waited like a witness. I didn't look at him. I didn't want to see the certainty in his eyes. I focused on my hands. They trembled. One still wore the ring. I slipped it off and laid it on the dresser. I didn't want him to touch it. He didn't speak, just shrugged off his coat, folded it carefully, laid it across the chair. Every motion was slow, deliberate, like a ritual. Then he reached for me. Not harshly, not roughly, but with a kind of practiced claim, like someone reaching for the last light in a dark hallway. I let him. I let myself go quiet. My mind drifted somewhere far off into the snow, maybe back to the night Robert proposed under the street lamp outside our first apartment. There was no pleasure in it, no heat, just movement, just breath, just a woman deciding to survive in the only way left open to her. But something shifted halfway through. Not in him and me, not desire, no, but awareness. I began to notice the pace, the way he hesitated, the flicker in his breathing. And for a strange, terrifying moment, I felt in control. It was fleeting, a flicker, but it was mine. Afterwards, he rolled away without a word. I pulled the blanket over myself, staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator rattle. He dressed in silence. As he stepped out of the room, he paused. "You did well, Clara," he said. "Better than I expected." And then, as if offering a bonus instead of a bruise, "There's more where that came from if you're interested." I didn't answer him that night. I just turned my back, pulled the blanket tighter, and waited for the sound of the door closing behind him. When it came, it was soft, almost respectful. That was worse somehow. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes wide, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling like memories I hadn't invited. The next morning, I washed my sheets. Not because I believed they'd be clean again, but because it was something I could control. For 2 days, I said nothing. To no one. I moved through the apartment like a ghost in my own story. The ring stayed on the dresser. I didn't dare put it back on. Then on the third evening, there was another knock. It was him, again. He stood in the doorway like nothing had happened. Same coat, same expression. But this time, he held something, a shopping bag. "I brought you something," he said, holding it out like an offering. I took it wordless. Inside was a dress. Dark red, tight at the waist, soft fabric. classy but not subtle, and a box. Inside, a pair of heels I hadn't worn in 20 years. "I thought you might need something to wear," he said casually. "There's an opportunity." Two gentlemen. Private, respectful, generous. My throat closed. He didn't press, just added, "They'll be here tomorrow night, if you say yes." And then with that same calm he always carried. "You don't have to decide now. Just consider it." He left the bag on the table and turned to go. I didn't call out to stop him, but I didn't throw the dress away either. That night, I sat in the kitchen with the dress in my lap, the heels on the table, like artifacts from a life I no longer lived. My reflection in the microwave door looked like a stranger. I thought of Robert, of the way he used to dance with me in the kitchen, barefoot, laughing. But Robert wasn't here. What was here was choice. Not a good one, not a clean one, but mine. And in a world that had taken everything else, maybe that was the first thing I'd had in a long, long time. The next night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I meant to. The dress fit too well. The heels made me taller, sharper somehow. My reflection didn't look like Clara from apartment 4B. She looked like a woman who knew what she was walking into and was doing it anyway. The knock came at 8:03. I opened the door. Two men. One was tall, broad across the shoulders, with kind eyes that didn't match his expression. The other was leaner, quieter, his gaze sharp, observant. And then it happened, twist, or fate, or cruelty. The taller one paused when he saw me, his brow furrowed just slightly. "Clara," he said, voice cautious. I blinked. "Do I know you?" He hesitated. "I was with Robert. That night, on the line." The words struck like cold wind. I couldn't speak. My hands tightened around the edge of the door. He looked away. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. But it was too late. I almost closed the door. Almost said no. Almost backed out into the safety of hunger and cold. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside. The room felt warmer with them inside. Not from heat, from something else. Presence. Tension. They didn't rush. They let me lead. I offered a seat, poured water. My hands shook. One of them reached out not to touch me, but to still the glass in my hand. "Only if you're sure," he said. I was never sure, but I nodded anyway. What followed wasn't passion. It wasn't romance. It was something raw, strange, human. I closed my eyes and let it happen. Not because I wanted to be touched, but because I needed to feel seen, wanted, real. At some point, the quiet one whispered, "You're incredible." You know that I didn't answer. I couldn't, but I let myself believe it, just for a moment. When it ended, they didn't speak much. One kissed my hand, the other thanked me, like they'd just heard a song they didn't know they needed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel cheap. I felt present. After they left, the silence returned. But it didn't feel the same. I sat at the edge of the bed, dress, wrinkled, makeup faintly smudged. The apartment hadn't changed. The walls still cracked. The heater still hummed low. But something inside me had shifted. I stood slowly and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't prettier, not younger, but she looked clearer. There were lines on my face I didn't remember, shadows under my eyes that hadn't moved in years. And yet there was something else, a steadiness, a kind of fragile pride. I touched the corner of the mirror. "You did that," I whispered. "You chose." And it wasn't shame I felt. It wasn't triumph either. It was presence. Later, I made tea, sat at the small kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the mug. I didn't flinch when the radiator groaned or when the wind pressed against the window. The world was still cold, but I wasn't numb anymore. That night, I didn't reach for the wedding ring. Instead, I wrote. I wrote Robert's name at the top of a page and told him everything, not just what had happened, but how it had felt. I told him about the guilt, the surprise, the strange clarity. I told him I still missed him. That part hadn't changed. But something else had. I had changed. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it beneath the old photograph of us from Coney Island, 1983. We were smiling, wind-swept, sunburned. I looked young enough to believe in forever. Now, I believed in something else. Not permanence, but power. The power of choosing, of surviving, and maybe, just maybe, forgiving myself. I don't know if this makes me strong or foolish. I only know it makes me real. We all carry lines we swore we'd never cross. Until life pushes us so close to the edge, those lines blur. And then one day, you're not who you were. You're who you had to become. For rent, for food, for a chance to be seen again in a world that stopped looking. They'll judge me. Maybe you will too. And that's fine, because this isn't a confession. It's a reminder that survival doesn't always look noble. Sometimes it looks like compromise, like silence, like a door opened when you should have slammed it shut. But if you've ever stood in a quiet kitchen with nothing in your fridge but a can and a memory, if you've ever stared at your reflection and wondered where you went, then you know. Then you understand. And maybe like me, you're learning that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and whispers can still move mountains. If you've ever stood at a quiet crossroads, unsure whether to hold on or let go, I see you. And you're not alone. Leave a comment below. Just say, "Still here," if you've ever made a choice that no one else understood. Like, share this story with someone who needs to feel less invisible today. And if these stories speak to something deep inside you, subscribe to Vows and Betrayals. There's more truth coming, and it's never too late to listen.